Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a theory that really challenges one of history's most important figures. It asks a pretty radical question. What if the Apostle Paul, a man who literally shaped Western civilization, was just the literary double of another guy, a figure who was branded a heretic? What if they were actually two identities for the same person?
Right, that's the core idea we're digging into. The theory basically says that the Apostle Paul we read about in the New Testament isn't a real historical person. Instead, he's a literary character, built from the life story of someone else entirely. Now, that is a massive claim, so let's see exactly how the argument is put together.
So to even begin to get your head around this, you need to know the two men at the heart of it all. One of them is a household name, all over the world. The other? Well, he was just as influential in his day, but way more controversial. A man who, for the most part, has been scrubbed from the official story.
Okay, so you've got the Apostle Paul. He's a central pillar of Christian belief, and his letters make up a huge chunk of the New Testament. And then you have this other figure, Marcion of Sinope. He was a rich ship owner, a Christian thinker from the 2nd century whose ideas were so out there that he got officially condemned as a heretic. So, on the surface, they seem like two totally different people from different times and with very different reputations. But this is exactly where the theory tells us to look a little closer.
Because, according to the theory we're exploring, if you really look, the stories of Paul and Marcion aren't just a little bit similar, they're practically identical. So let's start digging into the evidence that the source uses to build this case.
And we're not just talking about one or two flimsy coincidences here. According to this theory, the whole argument is built on more than 10 really specific, significant parallels that seem to lock the life stories of these two men together. So let's start with where they came from.
Just look at how these basic details seem to line up. The theory points out that both men had roots in Judaism that they later kind of distanced themselves from. Both had a Greek education, and here's a big one. Both are identified as Roman citizens, which was not a common thing at all. And even their jobs, a tent maker and a merchant, meant they were both constantly traveling all over the Roman Empire.
And it goes deeper than just their resumes. The theory highlights that both men are really defined by this huge life-changing moment. They both came to the realization that their old understanding of their religion was fundamentally wrong. And that revelation wasn't just a change of mind. It lit a fire under them, sparking a mission that took over the rest of their lives.
The parallels just keep on coming as we move into the next part of their lives. After their big conversions, both men traveled to the very heart of their religious world, trying to get approval for their new ideas. And the story of what happened when they arrived is, according to this theory, almost the exact same.
Just think about this sequence. Paul goes to Jerusalem, which was the center of the early Christian movement. Marcion goes to Rome, which was becoming the center of the institutional church. Now get this, the theory says both of them showed up with a huge financial donation for the leadership. And in the end, total rejection. Both men and their radical new ideas were turned away.
The similarities even extend to their life's work. Paul wrote letters and kept talking about my gospel. Marcion? He assembled a bunch of letters and promoted one specific gospel. Paul founded churches all across the empire, and Marcion founded a network of churches that was so successful it was actually a major competitor to the mainstream proto-orthodox movement for a while. So with all these parallels laid out, where does this all lead? Well, now we're getting to the real core of the claim, and it's not just about a shared biography. It's about the very words in the New Testament itself.
Okay, here it is, the theory's most explosive claim that the letters we all think were written by Paul aren't original. The idea is that they are, as the source puts it, castrated versions of Marcion's own work. The theory suggests the early church took the heretics' very popular letters, edited them, scrubbed them to fit their own theology, and then invented the character of Paul to be a safe, approved author, conveniently placing him in the past.
Let's just take a second to let that sink in. If this theory has any truth to it, it completely reframes the origin story of Pauline Christianity. It would mean one of its most important founders is actually a literary invention, created to basically absorb and neutralize the work of a man the church called its greatest enemy. So let's recap the argument real quick. The theory lays out over 10 biographical parallels.
It claims that the letters of Paul are really just corrected versions of Marcion's writings. And the final, absolutely stunning conclusion, that the Apostle Paul wasn't a historical person at all, but a literary character built from the real life of Marcion.
And all of that leaves us with a really fascinating question. Whether you find this specific theory believable or not, it makes you ask, when we find these kinds of shocking parallels between historical stories, how does that change the way we read history itself? Does it point to borrowing, a coincidence, or something else entirely? It's a great reminder to always look at our most foundational stories with fresh eyes. Thanks for joining this explainer.